How is everyone doing today? I'm your host, Joe Fernandez, a part of the marketing team over here at Tech 30. Thank you all so much for tuning into our webinar today. We are fortunate enough to have Trevor Silence, our application engineer from Tech 30, as he will be presenting this webinar's topic of using Excel in Mathcad Prime. We also have Jaron Clark, a sales consultant for Tech 30, and now I'm going to be passing it over to Jaron, and he will give you a little background information of who Tech 30 is and what we offer.
Thank you so much, Joe. And again, thank you everyone for joining us this beautiful Thursday. I hope you're having a wonderful week so far. Moving into the slides, as it relates to who we are at Tech 30, in short, we're an engineering company that helps engineering companies do engineering. So we do this with tools and by helping our customers make the most of those tools through training as well as engineering services. We would love to get to know you. We'd love to get and ascertain a bit more understanding of your business. And we really value when we're in a position to actually expand our customers' business and build a community by connecting customers who may benefit from networking with one another. Moving into the next slide, a brief overview of who we are. As mentioned, Tech 30, we just do a broad range of everything as it relates to mechanical engineering and enabling our customers to have a broader sense of their capabilities. And so we have we have services as associated with design, analysis, manufacturing, as well as PLM consulting. Established in 2002, we have 80 plus employees, 50 of which are engineers very specific to our technical group. We're located in Mission Vallejo. If ever you're local, feel free to give us a call and stop by if you'd like to schedule a visit or a tour in any capacity for any personal dialogue. We're registered with the Small Business Association, so we have a small to medium-sized business status. And the business units that we focus on are PTC software, additive manufacturing, engineering services, as well as Siemens software. Moving into the next slide, we are what you call a value-added reseller for PTC products. And so we focus on primarily Creo, Windchill, Mathcad, ThingWorx, and Vuforia. Moving into the next slide, I won't spend too much time here, but we also provide a very broad portfolio of 3D. And so as it relates to anything within that 3D printing space, you can look at these technologies on this page. I won't, as mentioned, go into too much detail, but just keep in mind that we focus on industrial use cases for 3D printing. We help our customers make additive manufacturing become a part of their finished product or used for tooling, fixtures, and jigs. If you have any interest at all in this area, please feel free to contact me afterwards and we can have a more in-depth conversation about your use cases. Moving on to the next slide, let's talk about Mathcad, the main reason you're all here today. Before I pass the presentation over to Trevor, I just want to inform you of the services that Tech 30 provides around Mathcad. Not only do we sell the software, but we also provide our unique value-added services to ensure that our customers make the most of their purchased software. But first, what is the value of Mathcad as a software, right? You have automation, you have collaboration, and natural math. Moving on to the next slide, let's talk about Convergence Services we offer for Mathcad. So customers often see the value of standardizing on a tool such as Mathcad to make it more collaborative, make it more efficient within an organization, and this will become very evident, especially after you see Trevor's presentation. But one of the barriers associated with adopting Mathcad is getting the calculations from other formats into Mathcad. I'm sure you all have day jobs, and who really has the time to bring their legacy Excel files and hand calculations and MATLAB files or even Mathcad 15 files into Mathcad Prime? Well, that's exactly where Tech 30 comes into play. You can give us your calculations in whatever format they're in. We will convert the data for you, and then we will hand you your new Mathcad files on a silver platter. We'll even train all of your users to use Mathcad to ensure that you are absolutely getting maximum usage of that tool. If this is a situation similar that describes something you may be experiencing or going through or the state of your engineering calculations, please contact us so that we can help. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Trevor Silence.
Hey everybody, my name is Trevor. I'll be walking you through this webinar today. So to get started, we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about creating a table using the copy-paste method directly from Excel. We'll also be going over importing and exporting Excel data. We can use the READEXCEL or WRITEXCEL function built into Mathcad to do that, or there's also a READFILE, WRITEFILE function. We'll get into the function arguments for both of these functions, some considerations to keep in mind when using these, and other read and write functions built into Mathcad. And lastly, we'll get into the Excel component. So we'll talk about inserting Excel components, editing them, setting up input and output expressions, and then even formatting your Excel component within Mathcad. So some use cases of these tools, you might find yourself lacking easy to import, like methods to easily import external data sources in your calculations and documentation. This is where Mathcad's built-in READEXCEL or READFILE functions would come in handy. If you find you're having trouble exporting data to files for use elsewhere, maybe you documented this data and you want to put it into like MATLAB or some other programming language, WRITEXCEL or WRITEFILE functions can help you export your documented data from Mathcad into other softwares. And then finally, if you feel like you want to access Excel capabilities without creating a whole new Excel document, then the Excel component can help you with this. You can get Excel functionality right inside of Mathcad, and you don't have to make a new Excel file. This is actually particularly useful if you want to just send some data to another person. The Excel component will hold on to that data, and you won't actually have to send them an Excel document with your Mathcad sheet. All right, so to get started, we're going to get right into Mathcad Prime here. I'm going to go over copying and pasting. So this is our data matrix in Excel. I'm just going to select this data right here. I'm going to Control-C, copy it, and then right into Excel, I'm just going to paste it. And right into Mathcad, I'll paste it. And so as you can see, Mathcad creates this table. We can go through and we can label the values here. So we have time, this is our distance, position, and then this is the speed. Oops. And we can even give them units. So distance, we'll say meters, position meters, and speed is meters per second. You can reference the names you've made for these columns. So if we say time and we put an equal sign, you can see that it's created this variable here, time variable, and it's in seconds units, so it automatically adds the units on there. So let's go back into this PowerPoint. The first thing we're going to talk about after the copy paste is the read file built-in Mathcad function. So within read file, there's some arguments. There's the file, which means the location of the file. This is in reference to your current working directory. You also have the option to put a file type. So by default, it's delimited, but in this case, we're going to be using Excel file type. Column width is specifically for delimited file types, so we don't need to worry about this for our example today. We also have rows and columns, which specifies what rows and columns you want to be reading from your file. And there's two other arguments, which is empty fill. This is if you come across a cell that has no value in it, what does Mathcad do with that? So by default, it puts not a number or NaN, but we can change that to be a 0, or you can set a string. It's just a way of changing the way that it imports the data. And finally, there's a decimal symbol, so you can choose from comma or period to indicate your decimal. So getting back into Mathcad, we're going to go down here. As you can see, we have our current working directory at this location, and then I specified the end file as this webinar data XLS that we have. I'm actually going to close this because Mathcad won't be able to read the file if this Excel sheet is open. From here, I've already specified the row, columns, and then what to do with empty cells. And so I'm just going to go through this read file function, and I'm going to add these values in here. So from file, we're just going to put in file, and then our type is going to be Excel type. Like I said previously, we don't need to worry about column widths, as that is specifically for delimited files. So I'll remove that. We do have rows, which is named row, and then column. And I'm actually going to leave this as default for now, just so we can see what the data looks like without changing the empty fill option. So if I specify this as E defined as READFILE, you can see it's populated this variable E, and we have our Excel data that we've selected. So as you can see, there's an empty cell here, which is listed as not a number. If we go back in and at eFill as 0, it's updated that value to 0. So this is basically the READFILE function. Next, we're going to talk about READEXCEL. It has a few less arguments, but it changes the way that it actually reads the range. So the file is the same. The range in this case will have to be in an Excel format. So it would either be like sheet 1 of A1 to B3, or you can use brackets and put a 1 inside of there if you want to reference the first sheet. It also has empty fill, like the previous example, and there's another argument called blank rows, which is if READEXCEL comes across a totally blank row, what does Mathcad do with it? So by default, it reads the blank row and it just fills the cells with not a number. But you can specify if you want to skip that row or if you want to stop when you come across a blank row. All right, so we're going to be loading the same data basically, but we're using READEXCEL instead of READFILE just so we can see the differences. So in this case, our file is going to be the same thing. It's going to be in file. And our range is going to be range 1. I'm going to leave these off to start again just so we can see the default response of Mathcad when loading data through READEXCEL. And I'm going to specify this as the A matrix. So as you can see, it's populated this A matrix with our Excel data. Now, if we compare this to our READFILE data, you can see that the value for time 3.6 is not listed. And that's because by default in READFILE, it will skip a blank row. Whereas in READEXCEL, you kind of have the option to choose whether you want to skip or leave it there or just stop when you come across one. So now I'm going to, if you notice on the left-hand side, we have A is equal to E and it says it's not. So this 0 means it's not equal to each other. So I'm going to adjust these arguments to see if we can make this equal to the previous imported example. So I'm going to set eFill as 0 and eRow as skip. And as you can see, A is now equal to E. So this is something to keep into consideration when importing data from external sources. Is you want to make sure that if you're importing something that it's going to match other data that you've imported. So this is how you'd get it to look kind of like the default for READFILE. Next, I'm just going to import the second part of this data. So on our Excel data worksheet, we have a second sheet, which is just acceleration data. So as you can see, for our range, we have acceleration from A2 to A22. So we could also use, instead of acceleration, we could use bracket 2, and it would have the same result. So our in file is the same. And for range, we're going to be using range 2. I'm going to make sure that these are the same as above so that we can have some kind of uniformity throughout our example here. And as you can see, they're both the same length, these two things, and then they're both skipping the 3.6 time row. All right, so getting back into our PowerPoint, I'm going to be going over how to write data from Mathcad. So there's two ways to do this for Excel. You can use the WRITEFILE function, which writes an Excel or tab delimited file from a matrix. And there's also the WRITEXCEL function. So this one has a few more arguments. You can specify the rows and columns of the matrix you're saving, as well as the range to which you want to save them to. So READFILE, just like WRITEFILE, it only exports data to the one sheet. So using READFILE, I couldn't pull Excel data from another sheet other than the first one. And same with WRITEFILE, I couldn't write data to another sheet other than the first one. So these are some things to take into consideration when deciding which built-in Mathcad function you want to use to read and write your Excel data. So we can go and show a little demonstration of this. We've specified outFile as webinar data out. And so I'm just going to go into here and change this argument to outFile. and then our matrix, I'm going to have matrix A. And so right now it hasn't written any file. In order to do that, you have to express it by adding an equal sign. And so now our file will have this populated into it. I'm going to use WRITEXCEL to do a similar thing. Our out file is going to be our file location. In this case, I'm going to use our B matrix that we specified as acceleration previously. For rows and columns, we want to export the whole thing, so I'm just going to remove these. And we do have an out range, which is specified as the 5th column, so it should be appended to the right of our A matrix. And likewise, I will express this, and if we open up this webinar data out, we should see the 2 matrices appended next to each other on the first sheet. And as we can see here, we got all the data from A and all the data from B added right here together. Another thing to take into consideration with this is Mathcad, when exporting to Excel, it doesn't include units. So make sure that whatever you're trying to save to an Excel file, you take the units out of it. It's easy to do. You just divide the variable by the unit that you want to remove. I'll be showing you in a little bit how to actually add units on, and then it should be pretty straightforward how to remove them. So some considerations is regardless of what system variable origin you specify, the rows and columns for either the WRITEXCEL or the READEXCEL function, those will start with 1 since it's working with Excel. Also, if you want to omit an optional argument, you have to start with the last argument in the brackets and work backwards. So for this WRITEXCEL function, if we wanted to omit rows, we'd also have to remove columns. Since range is in a bracket on its own, you wouldn't have to omit range to omit rows or columns. Also, when using READFILE, the types include delimited, fixed, and Excel. If you were to mix these types, you will have inequivalences. So if you were to import the same matrix from an Excel file as like a text file or a comma delimited file, when you're comparing the values, they would come up as false. So this is a general idea is just to make sure that you're using the same kind of import type across your whole worksheet. If you are using READEXCEL and READFILE, as we saw previously, then they will be equivalent if you have the right default values specified and arguments present. So some other functions that Mathcad has built in, we have ways to import data from text files, Excel files, as we've seen so far in this webinar. You can also import data from images and audio files, as well as binary files. So there's a lot of functionality in Mathcad to import and even write data and information across the board. Next, we'll be talking about Excel components. An Excel component is an embedded Excel object. So this doesn't actually open a new Excel sheet. It just embeds a little piece of Excel into your document, and you can use all the same functionality you'd have in Excel right there in Mathcad. An input expression can be inserted through clicking, typing, or using a component table, and even selecting a group of cells. You can also format the Excel component using your native Excel functions and formats. You can change the size of the font, the color, you can merge cells, you can even use those Excel functions. Any component placed in a header or footer of the document will not update. This is just something in Mathcad, so whether it's an Excel component or some other component, it will not be updated in the header or footer. Just something to be aware of. These are the steps for inserting an Excel component graphically. So you can click on the Excel component button, hit Insert Excel Component. From there, you can insert an input expression, and you can insert an output expression once you've manipulated that data as desired. So getting back into this worksheet, we have an Excel component populated here. These are the input expressions, which are pretty easy to use. You can always add another one like this, and it just creates this Excel with a subscript. In this case, we're going to put A here as our matrix. And as you can see, it's populated this Excel component with our A matrix. Similarly to our WRITEXCEL file, we're going to put B here, and this is going to append that B vector on the right-hand side of our A matrix. Since we did skip the 3.6 time value, and we have a lot of zeros here, I'm just going to make these not show up by putting not a number. And so this actually gets rid of the last 2 rows of the data we've had. So not a number is a useful tool if you know that you don't want to include some data in your analysis. So as you see, we have average speed sort of defined here with no argument. So I'm going to go into this Excel component, and with double clicking, you can see that Excel just opens up. And if you look at this file type, it still says it's the Mathcad file type. So it's not actually creating a new Excel document. It's just a temporary one, an Excel object here for your Mathcad file. So we want the average speed. This should be pretty simple. We're going to define the sum as we're going to use the sum from the first value to the last value of the speed column. And we're going to divide that by the quantity of values in this same column. And our average speed, according to this, is 1.35. So save and close. Close this one. As you can see, we have 1.35 updated in our Excel component. So to get this value out, I'm going to type Excel. Similarly to how the input expression starts with Excel, your output expression will need to end with an Excel. And then for a subscript, you can hit the left square bracket. If you need to use graphically, it's this matrix index right here. And then we need to have a quotation mark, and then F1 would be our average speed. And if you look, it's populated average speed right outside of our Excel component. As far as formatting in the Excel component, we can change things like color. We can make it bold. Maybe we want this to be gray and italic. So there's a lot of different ways you can change things using Excel component, and we can highlight this average speed value. And then we'll just save and close. And as you can see, our Excel component is updated to reflect the changes we've made. If we want, we can also hide these input and output expressions. So we just have this block of Excel component. So one more thing I'd like to show you guys is what do you want to do? Maybe you have sensor data and you want to actually display it. So real quick, I've already defined acceleration here as our B vector, and I've multiplied it by meters over seconds squared to give some units to it. So we can just put Excel in here, and then meters per second squared. Let me get rid of this. Okay, and then we'll also, I don't know if you remember, but previously we defined a time vector, and we'll put seconds here. And as you can see, we have a really quick plot. Something nice in Mathcad is you can actually just change your units. If you want to display it in feet, it does that automatically for you. So this may be some sensor data we have, and we want to see what it looks like on a plot with our time vector. So getting back into our PowerPoint, we've gone through Excel components, we've gone through copy and paste. We've also looked at some built-in Mathcad functions like READEXCEL and WRITEXCEL. So if you master these, you'll definitely see an increase in productivity. You'll have improved access and selection of data in non-Mathcad format. You can manipulate and document the data as needed within Mathcad. And then exporting it is also not too bad using the WRITEXCEL function. Excel components also bring useful capabilities right into Mathcad so that we can interactively import data and also share that data with other people without having to send them a whole Excel document. So that's the end of what I got for you. Let me know if you have any questions.
All right, thank you, Trevor. We actually got a question from Alex McNabb, and Alex's question is, when would you recommend the READFILE function as opposed to the READEXCEL component and vice versa?
Sure. So READFILE, it will only import the first sheet of your Excel data. So if you know that you only have one sheet and you want to get all the data into your Mathcad document, then by all means use READFILE. If you do need some more control of how you're importing that data, say you have multiple sheets, or you don't want all of the data, or you want to skip lines or change the way that blank rows are handled, then yeah, I would definitely recommend using READEXCEL above READFILE.
All right, thank you. And we also have a question from Derek Mitchell, and he wants to ask if you can review the most beneficial reason for skipping a line in Excel.
Okay, so a reason that you might want to skip a line in Excel would be if you have some sensor data that the sensor wasn't there for some time point. Maybe there's a error in the transmission, or you just have data that maybe not perfect. So then you might want to skip. You might also want to stop. So maybe you need to stop and evaluate what's going on with this data. So it's just nice to have that functionality built into Mathcad.
All right, thank you. And if you guys have any more questions, go ahead and type in the questions box or the chat box. While we wait, just to let everyone know, PTC is currently offering a huge deal through Tech 30, which is a buy two, get one free discount, applying to Creo design packages and PTC Mathcad. If you're interested in this promotion or interested in renewing your license, please be sure to get in touch with Jaron Clark. That's jclark@tech-30.com. You'll also see his contact and previous and follow-up email, so don't hesitate to shoot over an email if you're interested in this limited time deal. Looks like we have no more questions. Okay, we will also be posting this video on YouTube later today. On our YouTube channel, we have previous Mathcad, Windchill, and Creo webinars, so feel free to pass those along to your friends and colleagues. And please also be sure to subscribe to our channel, follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and you'll get the latest information regarding upcoming webinar dates and other topics as well. And if you could please just stick around for 10 to 15 seconds after this webcast ends, and please leave a comment letting us know what else you would like to see in the future for future Mathcad webinars, and also answer a quick survey. That would be awesome. And once again, thank you for everyone who has attended, and have a great day.